Hello and welcome to Bear Hunting Podcast episode number 2. I'm Matt Schumann, your host, as always. Today we're going to do a hunting story. This one is about my 2015 do-it-yourself black bear hunt in northern Ontario. It's sort of, I feel like this particular hunting story sort of embodies what I feel like is great about bear hunting. And so, what's sort of unique, I guess, about this story that probably has got a few of you thinking already is that, I'm American, as I said before, I'm from Michigan. And so how in the world did I go and do a do-it-yourself bear hunt in Canada? Because, as most of you know, you're supposed to have a guide in Canada, which is true. And so we'll get into that later. Anyway, first off, why initially I always wanted to hunt Canada, right? For a lot of reasons. For me, the pinnacle of bear hunting is going up to the far northern boreal forest, places where moose and woodland caribou, wolves and bears are king, and where there's few people. When you think of like the terrain I'm thinking of is the Canadian Shield, sort of huge rock faces, that drop down into beautiful lakes. Just sort of an untamed wilderness. There's this term going around in the hunting community right now, especially on social media. It's called trophy country. And I feel like one of the not talked about places is the Canadian Shield. It feels like it's untouched. It's not, but it feels like it's untouched. So, I feel like that's like the ultimate trophy country. So, anyway, so I had, I hunt a lot in Michigan and it's cool and all, but there's people and it's, I just want to go. There's been many times where I've sat in the blind or tree stand and just thought, man, if it was just me and the bears, I just want to go to a place where I can't see another person and I just want to hunt bears. And so, it kind of sets me up for the beginning of this story. So I guess it begins summer of 2014. I frequent a online forum and I was looking at this story by this guy who did a do-it-yourself hunt in Ontario. He wasn't successful, but I was like, wait a second, because he's from Michigan as well. And so I messaged him and I was like, hey, how did you do that? And of course the question came up on the thread, like, how can you do that? You're not from there. And he was like, well, it's real easy. Once you understand how the paperwork works, it's real easy. And so I did a little research into it, and I'm like, oh, you're right. Essentially, the way it works, we'll break this down. So, in Canada, it varies everywhere. You have to go through an outfitter, but there's this term called the guide rule, and some provinces have it, some don't. Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and Alberta have what's called the guide rule, which means you have to go through an outfitter to hunt big game, and not only that, but the guide actually has to guide you to varying levels, right? But places like Quebec and Ontario, particularly Ontario, do not. You just have to book through an outfitter to hunt big game. And so you do not necessarily have to be guided. And so back before they brought back the spring bear hunt, there was a lot of outfitters that had unlimited tags and just wanted to book hunters, but they couldn't really fill their slots. And so they just they started basically giving away what's called a self-guided hunt, which was, you book the cabin or give them some sort of fee, to make it worth their while, but then they don't provide any guiding services for you. You just go and do it. And so, and the only thing they have to do is you buy your hunting license and, they fill out, there's 2 forms for a non-resident hunt in Ontario. We'll do Ontario specifically since that's what I'm familiar with. I'm not sure how Quebec works, but you buy your actual bear tag, and then the outfitter has to fill out a form. It's your bear tag validation. It's a white form that it's basically a contract that you both sign, and that validates your bear tag. And so that's how it kind of works. So basically, what I did is I went through an outfitter, and I went through this outfitter, and I booked a cabin for a week, and he let me use his exclusive bear management area, and all he did was sign my bear validation tag, and I was good to go, and I did everything myself. So, but that's the way it worked. Nowadays it's kind of hard in Ontario specifically because they brought back the spring bear hunt, and the Ministry of Natural Resources caught a lot of tags from outfitters. They don't have unlimited tags anymore. They basically said, whatever you've been doing, that's what you're going to do. And so they didn't have the excess tags. They don't have the excess tags anymore. So now they just kind of pretty much try to make it work. They try to just do the full guided thing now. So it's kind of hard to do a self-guided thing for the most part. I think there's exceptions, and I'm hoping to take advantage of one of those exceptions here this next spring, but we'll see what happens. So anyway, so that brings me to, I was doing a bunch of research trying to figure out how to do it. I figured out how to do it. It's really easy. It's not rocket science at all. You just got to find an outfitter willing to do it. So, I decided because I messaged that one guy, and he was hunting an area I didn't really want to go to. It was real close to, it was on the east side of Ontario, and I don't know. I wanted to go somewhere remote. Like I said, what I was looking for was to go up into like the Canadian Shield and just hunt bears that may have not ever seen people before. And so, so I did some research, and I found actually an outfitter that advertises self-guided hunts. They called it self-guided, do-it-yourself, self-guided, same thing. And they're up on the northeast side of Lake Nipigon, which is Arctic watershed kind of north. It's middle of nowhere, right? Basically they're on the northern edge of the highway, the highest highway up in Ontario. So, you couldn't really go too much further, except for, if you flew in or whatever. But that once you start flying places, that brings up the price tag, and I like to do it for somewhat inexpensive. So, but anyway, So yeah, but the other thing was, it had to be reasonable for me to get there too. I live in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. I didn't want to drive, 24 hours to go to a bait site or something. So, because I figured, what my kind of game plan was to go up there, bait, a week or something before the hunt, and then return and then hunt off that bait. So, and so it had to be somewhat close, but anyway, so it was back that winter of 2014, 2015. I found an outfitter that was willing to do it, and I booked the hunt and did a bunch of scouting, figured out the plan, and sort of figured out what my general, plan was. So, anyway, fast forward to summer of 2015. So my hunt's August 15th of 2015. My plan was to go up there 2 weeks ahead of time, set up a bait, which is, I know this sounds crazy because it's like a 10-hour drive up there one way. And so my plan was to run up there, set up a bait site, set up a bait site, and then come back 2 weeks later and hunt. So I did a bunch of aerial scouting via Google Earth and all that stuff. Because what I did is I had the outfitter send me, because outfitters up there, they have like a specified bear management area that they can operate in, and so I was given sort of a outline of where I could hunt, and so within that boundary I figured out, okay, how am I going to get in here the area I had to access it with my quad. I mean, I guess I could have walked in, but it would have been a long, long hike. And if you're trying to bait a lot of bears long term like that, it's just, you need a quad. And so figured out kind of what the rough game plan was. And so I came out 2 weeks. My plan was to go 2 weeks ahead of time, scout bait, and then come back and hunt for opener. And so that brings me to about June before the hunt. I headed down to Big Woods, Big Bear Sense and Bait. I field staff for them. And so I went and bought a bunch of quality bait, some cookies, trail mix. You guys will find out I'm a trail mix fanatic. And so bought a bunch of that and tracked it in scents. Blueberry, you always hear about the blueberries up in Ontario. That's the main August food source for bears. And so I bought a bunch of blueberry attractant spray, Big Bear Ultra Red blueberry spray. It's kind of to mimic sort of what they're eating anyway. And so bought a bunch of bait, and then basically waited until, so my hunt was August 15th. Right around the 1st of August, don't tell my work, but I called in sick that Friday, and I loaded my truck up to the gills. I mean, I took a picture of it. It was ridiculous. I had my four-wheeler in the back. I just got a normal size half-ton pickup truck, and I loaded my four-wheeler in the back. I stuffed bait along the sides of it. I stuffed the whole back seat of my truck full of bait. I had bait in the front seat because my goal is to feed a bunch of bears for 2 weeks before I got there. And so, anyway, so loaded up. We'll have to put up on one of my social media pages. We'll have to put up pictures to accompany this. So, anyway, drove up there like 10, 11 hours, something like that. It was a long drive. Drove up along the North Shore of Minnesota through Canadian Customs, which is interesting, saying that you're going up to bait. Yeah, they didn't give me any problem at all going through Customs, but man, they looked at me funny, like, you're coming up here just to bait? You're crazy. So, but yeah, they don't have any problem with you bringing bait through the Canadian border or whatever, but make sure it's edible. That's the big thing. They'll ask you if you would eat it, because they don't want you bringing garbage across the border. And so you tell them that you're bringing that you would eat it or something, and they're cool with it. So, but anyway, I drove up there, got to the area and kind of drove around, got a general idea where I need to go. And then it was, there's long days up there. So I drove up, I dropped the quad and drove up into there, and it was like the middle of nowhere. I crossed this bridge, this rickety bridge. It's like, what in the world is this thing? And where I was hunting at, I should talk about that. It was an old, there was a huge wildfire that took over this whole, this area. And that's kind of the key to hunting up there is, because there's boreal forest everywhere, and there's not a whole lot of food. Food's kind of concentrated. That's one of the tactics with baiting. And so you gotta key in on where the bears are going to be anyway. And so where this wildfire was, it's all growing up with berries now. And so that's where the bears were. So I drove up, through this huge area. There was nobody back there. It was crazy. And I crossed this bridge. We'll call it Bearland. I think I called it. Yeah, I did. Bearland. I crossed the bridge to Bearland, and as soon as I crossed the bridge, it was like bear sign everywhere. There was bear scat everywhere. It was crazy. And so the issue when I was there, it wasn't like, I was driving around. It was like, well, there's bears everywhere. It's not like I need to figure out where the bears are. It's like, but where do I set up a tree stand or anything? Because it was so overgrown that I couldn't even, like, there was nowhere to set up. And so that was kind of my problem, because I mean, this wildfire had happened, like, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. So it wasn't, there was no giant tree, there was no big trees or anything. It was all just sort of just over your head brush and young aspen and, jack pine and spruce, typical boreal forest stuff. And so it was like, okay. So what I kind of decided was that, well, I'm going to have to hunt off the ground. There's no other way about it. I'm not going to get a tree stand in here. So whether I bring a ground blind or just sit on the ground or whatever, that I'm not really going to have a choice. So I drove back I set up, so anyway, I scouted, and it was getting dark. So I was like, all right, let's get out of here. So I drove out of there, and I slept in my truck that night, because after seeing all the bear sign, I was a little unnerved at sleeping there. So, I mean, I'm sure it would have been fine, but didn't want to chance it. So I was tired. So I slept in my truck that night. Next morning I woke up and drove back out there, and I set up along this blueberry patch, and it was sort of a funnel between two little lakes. And so I took like 3 4-wheeler trips just full of bait. I mean, I had that 4-wheeler just loaded with bait, and I dumped as much bait out there as I could, covered it with logs, and I brought some plywood to cover it up with too, and I just hosed the area with blueberry spray, and just left it for as good. I dug a hole, put the bait in or whatever, but I just hoped it would be enough to last the 2 weeks. And so, under normal circumstances, it should have been. So, loaded up, drove home that day. So the most ridiculous baiting run I've ever done. So, I mean, 20 hours of driving to go bait bears. I was leaving, and sort of at the trailhead, there was an old guy that pulls up on this 4-wheeler, and he's got a few buckets of oats, and he was just an old guy that was baiting for his son who lives in southern Ontario. So we got to talk, and he wasn't hunting anywhere near me, but we got to talking, and he's like, "Man, you must really love bears to come up here and bait." I'm like, "Yeah." So anyway, came back and set up my trail camera, of course, and waited 2 weeks. And so 2 weeks later, drove back up, and I got to the cabins, set up, and immediately went out to check my bait site. I got there, and like, I gotta get out there. I gotta get out there. So, cause I got up there August 14th, the day before opener. I want to make sure that, there's plenty of, time to get everything rebaited and everything. And, got out there, and, it looked like a bomb had gone off. There was, every last little bit of bait was gone. They dug up the hole. I mean, like twice the size it was. The plywood that I covered the bait with was literally chewed on. Like, there was a bite mark out of it. I don't know what they were thinking, but and it's crazy too, because I was kind of worried because there's blueberries already ripe when I baited. And so I was like, oh no, I hope, they get off the natural food and come hit my bait. And that didn't bother them. They apparently wanted plywood over blueberry. I don't know what was going on. So I'll have to post that picture too. That was insane. I was like, what in the world? But anyway, so baited, and came back, and my plan, in between there, I decided that I'm just gonna sit on the ground for the hunt. Just sort of with the wind in my face, just sit there. I had full camo and everything, and I got a Under Armour scent control clothing and all that junk too. So, so I, anyway, I rebaited, came back, checked out the trail camera. I unfortunately discovered that Took the bears like 3 days to find the bait, which is all right. And but it took them 4 days to clean out the bait. I mean, there's probably 3 barrels worth of bait out there. They took them 4 days. I couldn't believe it. And so then they kept coming back to. Unfortunately for me, there was a lot of blueberries in this patch, and so they were coming through anyway. I actually had pictures of, like, continued on days later that bears were just coming through feeding anyway. So I had that going for me. But, yeah, 4 days for 150 gallons. So, bears can eat a lot. So you hear all this stuff about, guys putting out a couple gallons every few days. You're not baiting bears if you're doing that. You're just, but anyway, baited, and next day was the hunt, so I got up early, and and when I was up there, it was kind of like I didn't really have much time to fish or anything like that either, because where my bait site was, it was like a 40-minute drive from camp, and then once I dropped the quad, it was another, it was like a 3-mile quad ride to my bait site. So, it wasn't like I was anywhere near people. So, it took a long time to get to the bait site. So, really, I got up in the morning, sort of leisurely got up, would mix my bait buckets, and I would head out there. And, by the time I'd leave. I wanted to sit for a long time too, so I didn't really have a whole lot of time to do much else. So, but anyway, I first day of the hunt got out there, and the bait hadn't been hit yet, which was sort of my mistake. If I were to do that again, I would definitely have just gone a week ahead of time, not 2 weeks, just because you can't. I don't even know how much bait you'd have to put out to feed bears for 2 weeks like that. It was sort of a learning experience for me. Like, okay, if you're going to treat it, I just don't even think you could. It doesn't matter how much bait you put out. I think they would eat it all. So, definitely, would only go a week ahead of time. But anyway, first day out, bears hadn't hit, and, I had a nice sit. I didn't see any bears the first night, but it was probably one of, if not my best night of hunting ever. It was, I'm gonna struggle to find the words for this, but even though I didn't see any bears, I was kind of in a funnel between 2 lakes, and I could hear the loons going all night. I heard wolves howling. I heard no people. If everybody on Earth died, I'd have no idea. It was incredible. It was everything I wanted it to be. I was in the middle of the Canadian Shield, and there was like there was nobody else in the world. It was incredible. I didn't hear any sort of human presence other than myself. It was awesome. I'm used to hunting Michigan, and it's like no matter how far back in the woods you hear 4-wheelers or grouse hunters, or which, there's not, obviously it's everybody's woods or whatever, but sometimes you just kind of want to be like, I want to be by myself. I just want to enjoy nature, and so that's exactly what I got. It was incredible. And that's that first night I got exactly what I wanted. The whole reason I went up to Canada was for that. And so it was just great. And I didn't see any bears, and it was just you go, and even just leaving was an adventure. It's like, it's dark, it's really dark. You got to walk out. You're in the middle of nowhere, and you walk out to your quad, you drive out, and there's moose, there's woodland caribou, there's wolves, there's bears, there's lots of bears, there's it just all kinds of stuff, and it's like, it sort of makes the hair in the back of your neck stand up a little bit, being by yourself out there. And so anyway, drove out. You have to leave and drive about 3 miles on your quad after dark. Get in your truck, get your quad loaded up, and drive back to camp. You're getting back at like 11 o'clock at night. So, anyway, but and as I was leaving, it was, of course, the Northern Lights are just blaring, which we see the Northern Lights around here, but they're not like that. It's like, whoa. So, I mean, it was just the perfect night for hunting. Just awesome. So, I mean, that made the trip right there, night one. So, second day, went back, bait had not yet been hit either. And so, sat there, and part of it too, and part of the reason why the bait hadn't gotten hit yet, the bait was out, there was tons of natural food, and the bait had been out, for a while, and it was really hot, like 90 degrees, which, bears only move at night when that's not true. They do move during the day, but they don't move as much and they don't move far from water because they got to keep themselves, cooled off or whatever. So, but, so that kind of slowed down progress. But anyway, night two, sitting out there, nights, I was getting out there 2 o'clock and staying until like 9, 10 o'clock. So, I mean, it was long sits, but, anyway, night two, I'm sitting out there, and, wind was in my face, and all of a sudden, I'm sitting there, all of a sudden I hear a bear popping his jaws at me. I'm like, oh man, crap. And I mean, he's like right behind me. I mean, he's probably not even 10 yards, but it's so thick, there's no way I can see. And so, I mean, this was, probably 6 o'clock at night. I'm like, oh no. And so I turn, and as soon as I turned, all of a sudden I hear, a bear galloping. That's the way to describe it. I don't, when a bear spooks, you can hear it's like thud, 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 thud. And so, sure enough, I was like, oh no. Of course, because I had the wind in my face, but it was also, the bear's primary, just the way that bear was coming that time. And so, since I was hunting on the ground, it's like, oh no. So, there's not really much you can do. So anyway, I was like, crap. So I got up and, I kind of went in the direction the bear ran, just sort of crept that way. And sure enough, there was because there was sand in front of where I was walking in. Sure enough, there was fresh bear tracks running. I mean, I can't believe I didn't see the thing. It was crazy. It sounded like it was a big bear too. The pad was like 6 inches wide. So it's like, oh man. But anyway, so that was awesome. Even just that. So it was kind of my blunder, but it was cool. So, that was night two. Night three was very uneventful. Beautiful night, no people, as awesome as could be, no bears, and the bears hadn't hit yet either. And so I'm gonna rewind a little bit too. So my wife had told me, I don't get this. My wife had a dream that I would shoot a bear on Tuesday. I think the hunt started Saturday. Yeah, the hunt started Saturday. And my wife had a dream that I would shoot a bear Tuesday. I don't know what she's doing dreaming about me shooting bears, but anyway, she told me the whole time, well, it's Tuesday. You're going to shoot a bear Tuesday. You won't shoot a bear till Tuesday. And I'm like, that's crazy. I don't know what you don't know what you're talking about. She's like, nope, it's not Tuesday. It's not Tuesday the whole time. It's not Tuesday. It's not Tuesday. So, well, Tuesday rolls around. She's like, yep, all right, we'll see you with a bear. I'm like, you're crazy. I hope so, but you're crazy. So anyway, I got there, and let's see. So I got there Tuesday. This is Tuesday. And the big thing that accompanied Tuesday was a huge shift in the weather. It went from 90 to like 60. It got chillier. It was nice. Overcast. The wind direction changed, which gave me a much, much better, position on the bait. I was able to sit in a direction where the bears probably weren't going to come. I mean, they really weren't coming from that direction at all. And it was a much better situation Tuesday. And so got there, and sure enough, the bait had finally got hit. I was like, yes. So pulled the camera, because my typical strategy when I hunt is I pull up, in the four-wheeler, I bait, and I'm wearing a different set of clothes, and then I pull away and I change into my hunting clothes to stay scent free, not reek of bait either, and then creep back and hunt. Well, I pulled up in my bait clothes and I checked the trail camera, and sure enough, I had bumped a bear off the bait. I'm like, no way. And so I dropped these bait buckets, and I walked away. I'm like, okay, I got to get out of here, and I'll change in my hunting clothes, come back. And so left the bait buckets there, drove away to my spot, changed really quick, came back and sat down. And so very optimistic. And they were nice. It was a nice bear too. Actually, there was two different bears that were coming in, but they were both nice. So anyway, sat down, was sitting there, and nice night, nice cooler night too. And the wind was blowing, so I didn't even need to use my thermocell, which is, by the way, if you don't hunt Canada without a thermocell, you're crazy. You definitely need the thermocell's key. But anyway, so I was sitting there. It was about 6:00. I'm sitting there, and all of a sudden, corner of my eye, I see a flash of black. I'm like, oh, sweet. And I'm hearing crack. I'm actually hearing the bear break sticks, which is a good sign if you're hunting for a bigger bear, because bears usually just appear on the bait unless they're a big bear. Then they come in snapping twigs and stuff because they want to be known, I'm here, I'm a big bear. And so sure enough, I see this bear come in, and I'm sitting on the ground. I'm only 20 yards from the bait. I'm hunting with my 30-06, which for the adventure of this hunt, I definitely didn't feel like I needed a bow or anything. This was adventure enough, and so I brought my 30-06 with me. And so I shoot a Tikka T3 30-06 with a just Leupold VX1 scope. Just great gun. I use it for everything. It's just fantastic. Not sponsored by him or anything, but I love the gun. So if you're looking for a great gun, Tikka. Anyway, I think I was shooting Barnes 165 grain tip triple shocks, which I love those. They kill things very quickly. So for all you gun and ammo junkies, that's what I was using. Anyway, and so this bear creeps up. It starts walking up, and I get set up, and it felt a lot like turkey hunting in a way, because I'm sitting there, I got a face veil on, I'm just slowly turning, and this bear crept up and got to the bait and gave me a nice broadside shot, and I looked at it, and of course it was a nice bear, and pow, took a shot, double lunged it, and immediately heard it ran off just a little ways, heard the death moan, and got up, and of course I'm just stoked. This is what I wanted. This was incredible. And so I walked up, and sure enough, there it was. The bear went 20 yards, more or less just rolled down a hill essentially, and so of course into some nice thick alders, but and so actually they weren't alders, they're young aspen, that's what it was. And so anyway, there it was. It was about how much did it weigh? It was actually only 190 pounds, live weight. It was a sow. When the age came back, it was 7 years old. Yeah, it was a 7-year-old sow. The head threw me off. It was a just big wedge-headed old sow. Very big bone. The reason she was so light, she didn't have really hardly any fat on her. No cubs, obviously. Just great bear. But she had a little bit of fat on her, but not much. That's the thing. Like, weights are a hard way to judge bears, because I mean, like I said, this was a 7-year-old sow. I've shot a 5-year-old sow that was uh, almost 250 pounds. So, I mean, there's age and weight do not, they don't coincide at all. So, anyway, this bear was awesome. So, I was just very, very blessed to take this bear. And so, and, anyway, I was just very, very grateful. You know, anyway, so, once you're, in that situation, you go, oh man, now the work begins. I'm in the middle of nowhere. I've got a 200-pound bear to pull out by myself, load up into a four-wheeler, and get 3 miles out of here. So I gutted it out there, and I got the four-wheeler as close as I could, drug it out there, loaded up on the four-wheeler, and made pretty quick work of it, and did a nice little drive out. Got back to camp, and skinned it that night. Of course, go figure, the northern lights were blaring as I drove out with the bear. It was awesome. I mean, it was the ultimate wilderness experience. So, drove out, kept the heart for dinner that night, and drove out, skinned the bear that night, and then the next day spent all day butchering it, and which it was nice to get the bear that day, because the next day it monsoon rained. So, and then we went back, cleaned up the bait site, packed everything up, and which, by the way, also the bait got hit again. Shooting the bear didn't really bother it, so there was good. They basically cleaned out the bait. I couldn't believe it. So shooting the bear there didn't really bother him. So, but anyway, cleaned up and had an awesome adventure. So left the next day. So after we cleaned up everything. So, but butchered most of the bear there. Got it pretty much all squared away. The meat was fantastic. I don't know if you've ever had a bear that's been eating on blueberries like that, but oh man, so good. It was like sweet. I made the back straps into steaks. I mean, it was like you seasoned it with sugar. It was just incredible. So, but yeah, ate that bear up is pretty quick actually. So, fantastic meat. Had the bear heart in Canada, pan fried at the cabin. It was awesome. It was just an incredible adventure. So, I mean, I really got what I was hoping for. So, but yeah, it was just as awesome as an adventure as you could probably have. So, yeah, that's my do-it-yourself bear hunt in Ontario. They don't really advertise it too much anymore, but I'll tell you what, if you like to do things yourself, and try and don't really think you need a guide or something, and you get the opportunity, go for it. They're really inexpensive. I basically just booked a fishing package, which is like $500 at the time, and which got you a cabin to stay in, which is nice because then you can shower and you can stay somewhat scent free, and you don't have to be like, you can be somewhat comfortable, but still have I mean, I don't think staying in a cabin up there really takes away from the wilderness experience. I mean, it was insane. I mean, just even getting to and from the bait every day was like an adventure in and of itself. I mean, it's basically like it's like even just four-wheeling to the bait was an adventure. So, I don't know. But if you're into that sort of thing, definitely I would highly recommend doing something like that. But, yeah, I'm trying to go again this next spring. I'm hoping to, I've got a outfitter that as long as their tags are the same, I'm going to do a spring bear hunt in Ontario. So, obviously we'll keep you posted on that. But, you'll hear all about that. So, but, anyway, that's about all I got for this. So, we'll wrap this up. Thanks for tuning in. See ya.